Good evening. Hey, Councilman. Thank you all so much for coming out, and for those tuning in on social media. We appreciate you checking in. And so tonight's town hall is going to be slightly different than what would you think of a traditional town hall, kind of where I, as the administration, will stand up here and just answer questions or present to you what we have done, what we know, things of that nature. You know, what we did when we first came in my administration, we put out a request for proposal, essentially trying to seek somebody to commit to do some work for the city. And we understand in the flooding events that occurred last year, as well as those that have occurred over the last decade, have really devastated many of our homes all across the city, in all four corners of our city. Last year's floods alone, you know, in a city that has over 32,000 homes, the estimates are that some 20,000 experienced flooding to some capacity. What we thought prudent was to put out a proposal to see if we can get a third-party vendor to come in to do an independent assessment of our water and sewer infrastructure, as well as provide us with a pathway to not only mitigate flooding in the future, but to also begin to invest into green infrastructure, trying to make Dearborn a more green city to assist with the absorption of water and hopefully the future mitigation of flooding for our families and for future generations. And so what we have today is the OHM, who has won the contract, will be working on this 2-year-long study. And what they're going to do is really provide you with kind of the 1, 2, 3, the basic FAQ of what this study will entail, what they will look at, what they will inspect, how will they divide the city, things of that nature, to provide the residents a baseline understanding of what we're doing as an administration to try to tackle this problem in the long run. We know that there has to be a mix of solutions, that we have to have some short-term interventions, some long-term interventions. That we can't simply wait for the study to finish before we even start moving. And so that's why in the interim, we've already moved forward some projects that will hopefully help alleviate some neighborhoods with flooding as they present themselves. For example, with the support of council, we moved forward something called a flat valve on a major sewer line. And what this is essentially is a backflow preventer on a major sewer line that will help mitigate flooding for some 3,000 homes in one neighborhood. This opportunity came to us based on a state project that was happening. We thought it was wise for us to take action. In addition to the contractors that you'll hear from today, OHM, we also have brought in some experts who are wholly focused, in addition to those representing, who are wholly focused on green infrastructure. And so what we're going to do is, while this study is happening over the next 2 years, any construction project that we are to undergo over the next 2 years, we're going to ask for their input about what we can be doing from now to incorporating green elements such as permeable surfaces, any additional rain gardens or bioswales or retention or detention basins, things of that nature that we can begin to incorporate while we're waiting for the findings from the study to ultimately provide us with a long-term pathway for how we prevent flooding in the city of Dearborn. And so we're really taking this issue very seriously. This issue we talked about in the campaign very heavily, and an issue that's top priority for this administration, as well as I know for this council. And so with their support, this study has officially commenced, and we're hoping for some serious findings over the next 12 to 24 months based on how they move forward. And so I'm gonna ask the team to come up, they'll introduce themselves, and then hopefully take it from there. As it pertains to kind of the questions that you may have, I believe they're going to ask the residents for any input that you may have, you know, just some baseline questions as it pertains to your experiences in the city of Dearborn, some flooding events that might have happened for you. But what I would love for us to focus on more than anything is really, what is the pathway forward? How do we get a baseline understanding for our water and sewer infrastructure system? How do we understand where our faults are? How do we then begin to identify feasible solutions that we can implement? We know that any sort of long-term solution is going to be a mix of both great infrastructure, which is kind of your construction underground, as well as green infrastructure. And it's going to be costly. The good news is there is an abundance of dollars right now from the state and federal government as it pertains to water and sewer infrastructure. And we have one heck of a grants team and city administration that has been fairly successful at grant opportunities. And so we're hopeful that we'll have more success, hopefully with a little guidance from the team that we have joining us. And so with that, I think I'll welcome the team to the stage and have you all take it over. Thank you. I do just want to recognize Councilman Ken Paris, who is here in the audience. So thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to have everyone start off and introduce themselves, so I'm not the only face and voice that you see, because we do have a pretty big team here to help with this study. I'm Valerie Novice. I've been an engineer doing this type of study for about the last 20 years, and I'm the project manager for the team.
Hi, I'm Brandon Ellison. I'm going to be the assistant project manager and lead hydraulic modeler on this project. I've got 12 years of experience in the field dealing with all sorts of complicated stormwater and conveyance issues. So this is something I'm actually very excited about getting involved in.
Good evening, I'm Kristen Chaffin. I'm a project engineer on the project, and I will be assisting with some of the modeling efforts.
Hello, I'm Mary Treziak. I'm a data analyst, and I will be helping with the collection and management of the data for this project.
Good evening, I'm Patrick Judd. I'm with Environmental Consulting and Technology. I am the senior manager for the Landscape Architectural Green Infrastructure Studio, and I've actually been practicing green infrastructure for over 35 years and be a part of the team in which we begin to evaluate those nature-based design opportunities. Hello, my name is Michael Beshara with Beshara Public Relations. I'll be assisting the team in communicating with residents and City Hall about your concerns and things that will be taking place from here forward. Thanks.
All right. We have one other sub-consultant as part of our team, HDR. They will be assisting with the alternatives analysis when we get to that phase. As the mayor mentioned, this is a 2-year study. I will talk you through some of the phases of the project and talk you through what you can expect at the end of the study and what you also cannot expect from our team. All right, we had introductions of our team. As I mentioned, I'm Valerie from OHM Advisors, and we have our other project partners is HDR, ECT, and then Beshara Public Relations. Okay, so why are we here today? Well, I don't think it's any surprise that we are here to address and work through potential solutions to address the widespread flooding that that the region and the city has experienced. None of us want to see our streets flooded, but more importantly, none of us want our homes to be flooded at the expense of some of the infrastructure. In particular, probably the most noteworthy flooding event. Does anyone experience flooding for the June 25th storm event last year? Yep. I think most of us have. It's one of about 4 key storm events that we're going to be looking at and focused on evaluating sewer system hydraulics and then developing solutions to look at those particular events. The other 3 events outside of the June 25th, 2021 event are the August 11th event from 2014, if you can remember that. Most of us probably do if we were impacted personally. And then there are 2 other events in July of last year that we will be specifically looking at how our proposed alternatives within the sewer system will address flooding at specific homes. Just to give a little bit more background of how we got to the situation that we're in today. Well, our sewer infrastructure was built when people started migrating to the region. And so that combined with continued growth, which is great, economic growth for the region, but that has further contributed to some of the sewer capacity issues that we're seeing. On top of that, I will tell you, as somebody who looks at the rainfall statistics, we are seeing an increase in the quantity of larger storm events in the region. So instead of a bunch of smaller size storm events, we're seeing more frequent, larger storm events, which our sewers were not necessarily sized to handle. And so the water follows the path of least resistance, which right now unfortunately is homes and streets. Okay, so what are we doing as a part of the study? Big picture, we are starting to collect a bunch of data. Data from residents who have personally experienced flooding is one of those pieces of data that we're collecting. Another piece of data that we're collecting is we are putting meters in the sewer, in certain segments of the sewer, to quantify how much flow is in the sewer during a specific rainfall event. We're also studying some of the past flooding scenarios to help predict future scenarios. We're taking all of that information and we're going to put together a model, a simulation that will attempt to reflect what's going on, and then develop a bunch of alternatives or run scenarios to develop alternatives to what it will take to mitigate those flooding situations. There's two buckets for that. There's what I call short-term solutions, which are things that we can do today and now that will address some of the flooding, but not all of the flooding. And then the second piece of that is long-term solutions, which are going to cost more and be bigger infrastructure projects, but address a wider berth of the flooding issues. The focus area is citywide. What you're seeing up here, the map might be partially legible. There are printed versions of this map at the front here for those in person. But we're looking at the city split up into 6 different districts. And really the reason for that is depending on where the sewers in those districts outlet, they may be independent of each other. And so that's how the city is split up and how we're looking at the sewer system. We will be developing solutions for each of the 6 districts and also looking at potential citywide solutions as part of this. Okay, so I mentioned there are 6 phases. The mayor also mentioned that this is a 2-year study. We are just starting the first month of that 2-year process. The first phase is the short-term mitigation concepts. These are things like a flat gate or a backflow preventer in the main sewer systems. It might be something such as we're blocking that off, but then pumping the water straight out into the river. We're looking at some of the short-term, what can we do now to address some of that flooding? The second phase, although I will tell you that this is a phase that will go the entire duration of the project, is community engagement. This is not the last time that you will hear from our team. It is not the last time you will get an opportunity to provide feedback and to share your information with the team. We will be coming back and sharing information on how the study is going throughout key phases in the process. And you will always have an opportunity to share information with the team at any time throughout the study. We just started, or are starting this week, with those flow meters. So we are putting meters in a couple of locations in the sewer system, and those will be in the ground measuring the flows in the sewers for about a year. So from now until about this time next year, we're going to be collecting that data, and we're going to use that data to go through the development of that simulation, the model simulation. So the next phase is where we're developing hydraulic models to represent the sewers. At a high level, what we're doing is we're basically setting up a computerized Lego system of the sewers infrastructure, the pipes, where they are, how big they are, how they connect to each other, where they're going, and then we'll start putting water through that Lego system via a computer simulation and try to understand if we're going to predict the flows in the system, and then we're going to modify those Legos or those blocks, those sewers, and then those are going to be the alternatives or the solutions that might potentially impact or address the homes that have been impacted. These are the different steps that we go through if you're interested in the technical details of that. That's going to happen around this time next year because we're collecting the data from the sewer system right now. A big component of this is, what is our expectation of our sewer system? Do we as a community expect that there is never going to be a home ever that floods again in the city of Dearborn, regardless of the size of rainfall event? Or are we going to allow, or are we willing to accept some street flooding during very extreme conditions, and those all have a different cost to them. So there's a balance as a community, and so one of the pieces that we need to talk about as a community is, where's that right balance for the community? If I were a homeowner that was continually impacted by flooding, I would want some assurance that my home is not going to flood again. And so where is that water going to go? Is it going to go in our streets? Is it going to go in a big basin in one of the in an area in the city? And then the final phase is working through possible solutions. So we're then moving those Legos, changing the sizes of the Legos to come up with an optimal solution that minimizes the impact to the homes in the city. And at the end of the project, I define success as having an engaged and involved community throughout that process, where you understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, that we have an improved sewer system or a path to an improved sewer system, and that we're seeing a reduction in the number of homes that are flooding for these extreme events. And that is balanced with an equitable and cost-effective solution for the entire community in the city of Dearborn. And that we have a roadmap. So as the mayor mentioned, at the end of our study, I cannot promise you that I will have fixed all of the flooding issues. But what I will tell you is that at the end of our 2-year process, we will have created a roadmap to implement solutions that will then address the flooding issues. It is not an issue that came about in a day, and it's not going to be an issue that's resolved in a day, but we will have a roadmap to a path forward, and then supporting identifying funding opportunities to help implement those solutions. So what we were originally going to do is then have a couple of different stations where we could break off and dive a little bit deeper, but because we're doing a hybrid situation, we're going to actually open it up to people to come to the microphone here and ask questions, and then I believe someone is monitoring the live stream if any questions are coming in through that avenue as well. Okay, so next steps, I mentioned we're collecting the data right now. We're starting to evaluate some short-term solutions to the flooding, and we are going to start building those Lego models. And so as we get the data from measuring the flows in the sewers, we can begin to tweak the Lego parts so that it's reflecting what's in the ground and what's occurring. And with that, I'm going to ask my team to come back on the stage, and we will open it up to any questions you have about the process or details about where we're going.
So I guess these are questions, so I wrote it down. If you want to read it, explain, or I can use the microphone, whatever.
Sure.
My name is Girish Patel. I'm the resident of 7,000 State Man. I'm one of the residents. The important part, I think that people need to know, I think we've been doing the combined sewer overflow project for the last 30 years. Can you briefly talk about what is the CSO project? You know, we've been doing for 30 years and we're spending lots of money. So, and we are paying it through the tax. So can you let the people know again what is the CSO project and why we had to do the CSO project briefly?
Sure, thank you. So the CSO project, that stands for Combined Sewer Overflow System. And the Combined Sewer Overflow Program is a requirement from the state of Michigan. Most of the older communities in the state of Michigan have what we call combined sewers. So our sewage, when we flush our toilet, and the rainwater are combined in one single pipe. And when it's not raining, that's not a problem. That pipe, the flows get sent to a treatment plant. The flows are treated properly to water quality standards before being discharged to a local water body. When it rains, and when it rains really hard, more than the system can handle, those flows were sent untreated to our local water bodies. And so as a requirement by the state of Michigan, they said, you can't do that. We have to treat the water before it goes into the local rivers and streams for both the bugs and the critters and for us humans who come in contact with that water. And so the city has spent a lot of money and a lot of time over the past 30 years achieving compliance with that program that was required by the state of Michigan.
That's a mandatory project, and I believe that's from the federal government, right? Under Clean Water Act?
Yes, it is a mandatory requirement that is administered by the state of Michigan, but is a requirement at the federal level. So in Michigan, the way that the statutory and jurisdiction works is the Environmental Protection Agency passes the authority and responsibility to administer that program to the state of Michigan, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy.
So the question comes in, are there any penalty if you don't abide by that requirement?
Are there any penalties if you don't abide by that requirement? Yes, there are. So the city, just like all the other communities that are expected to address or required to address the combined sewer overflow issues within the city, is usually given a deadline to comply with that criteria. And if the deadline to address those combined sewer overflows is not addressed, then there's a pretty steep fine that the city could pay.
Is it $25,000 a day perhaps?
$25,000 a day, thank you.
The question then, do we know how much we spend? I can tell our finance department how much money we spend, I guess, on CSO project?
I am not clear on how much money has been spent on the CSO program in the city to date, but that's something that I can ask the city to provide and share that information.
It's roughly $500 million, that's what our guesstimate is, but that's what. Sewer separation is part of the CSO project. That has been done for the last 15 years. Can you briefly discuss about the sewer separation project? That's where the city went after in front of the houses and constructed new sewer lines. Can you just put down, I guess, some weight on that part, sewer separation?
Sure, you're asking me to explain what sewer separation is?
Yes.
Okay, so as
Sure.
one solution to the sewers, the combined sewer overflow issue is to separate the sewers. So I mentioned combined sewers means that our sewage and our rainwater is in one pipe together. One solution to address that requirement from the state of Michigan and the federal government is to separate those flows into two separate pipes. So you have one sanitary sewer pipe only, and then one pipe that carries the rainwater.
So the question comes in, I guess, because during that flooding event, there was a perception, I guess, that we spent so much money as part of the sewer separation. And I guess it was construed, I guess, resident that, hey, you spend so much money on sewer separation, how come our basements are still getting flooded? So is the sewer separation project and basement flooding project, are they same or they are different?
I'll do that if you don't mind. Sure. So, Yunus Patel, former city engineer, if you don't know, obviously he has a list of questions. And so what I want the questions to focus on is the study that they're going to do and not the work that the city did. Well, to the questions of Mr. Patel was, did the CSO supposed to alleviate basement flooding? As the mayor, what I'll tell you, some of the letters that were mailed to residential homes said the CSO project was supposed to alleviate basement flooding. Now, is that the primary goal of the CSO project, right? Obviously, that's not the primary goal. However, in the CSO, when you begin to separate, you do increase capacity because you now have a dedicated line for sewage, a dedicated line for rainwater. And so it does increase capacity. What I would love to do, you know the answers to the questions that you're asking. And I know for many residents, I understand that. I understand that. But the goal of today is not to review the actions of the city under Yunus Patel's leadership. The goal of today is to ask questions of those who are conducting a study, of what they will be looking at, any questions you might have regarding the study that they're going to do over the next 2 years, and not really, to sit here and try to evaluate the work that occurred under former city engineer Yunus Patel. I don't want to divulge this town hall into an evaluation of the prior administration or prior city engineer's work. I don't think that's, the goal of this next 2-year study is to give an independent and third-party analysis and viewpoint of where should we spend our dollars, how should we spend our dollars, what is the most impactful way to spend our dollars to help mitigate flooding in the short and long term. And I think the most impactful slide that they had was near the end. What is the expectation? You as residents, what is the expectation? The expectation is, regardless of how much rainfall hits the city of Dearborn, is the expectation that the absolute guarantee that my home will not flood, is the expectation that if we receive the same level of rainfall that we received last year, X amount of inches per hour, whatever it might be, that there's a 95% chance my basement will not flood, that I'm okay with the street flooding. I'm not okay with my basement flooding. I think that's the type of feedback and input that the group is looking for, because when we come to presenting the solutions, if we're looking for 110% assurance that we're not going to nothing will flood, no street, no basement, there's a cost to that. If there's 95% confidence interval, there's a cost to that. 90%, and so on and so forth. So I would love to really provide the opportunity to any resident that has any questions or input or feedback for the group that's conducting this independent study about those matters. Additionally, you'll hear that they're also partnered with one of the premier firms that does green infrastructure work. We're already taking a perspective on open contracts now, open construction projects, and what we can do to begin to incorporate green infrastructure work starting today. We don't want to wait for the 2-year study to finish. We want to look at every single project that we currently have open to see what we can be doing today to begin to incorporate those types of green infrastructure frameworks throughout the city of Dearborn, because that will help us build capacity. And so I'll provide them your list of questions.
Yeah, one more thing I want to ask about that.
I have a question.
This study part. So is this part of the study, I guess, one of the requirements, I believe, that once I read the RFP, that you're going to plot the hydraulic grade lines, right? Series of hydraulic grade lines for each and every sewer run. Is that my understanding correct?
One of the steps that will be in the process is, I'm going to go back to the Lego scenario. When we get done building the Lego set that represents the underground assets of the city, and we'll put water through that, we are going to look at what is the hydraulic grade line, or what is the projected water surface elevation within pipes.
So my point is, at the end of this study, behind my house where I live, there is a combined sewer system. I'm going to get the hydraulic grade line for various storm events for that specific sewer line. Is that correct or not?
We will have hydraulic grade line elevations reflective of the critical points along the sewer system for a variety of storm events.
That's not what I understood critical, but I thought it was all. But that's fine. Thank you.
Hello, I got a question from the live from a Zach Haidar. How many inches of rainwater can the city sewer system currently handle? 6 inches, less or more?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I would say that it depends. on a lot of different factors. It depends on the elevation of the river water. It depends on the capacity of the system downstream. It depends on if it's been raining a lot before that 6-inch rainfall event comes. Team, am I missing any other factors in there? Yes. So how fast that 6 inches falls, if it falls over 4 days or if it falls over 2 hours. It's not an easy answer.
Good evening, Leslie Herrick, Dearborn City Council. Could you remind us what the state requirement is regarding the amount of rainfall in a city our size, that the sewer system be able to hold what capacity in what amount of time? How many inches in a 24-hour period or something like that? And does our system meet the state requirement?
I'm going to have Jim Scholl, who's our team member from HDR, talk through that a little bit more.
The pipe size requirement is depending on the type of sewer. So, for example, the combined sewer system is typically sized for the 10-year, 24-hour peak, and that, in Dearborn's case, would be typically less than around 3 inches, 2.5 to 3 inches. The storm sewers typically would be sized for a larger event, but at this point that's not a regulatory mandate for the size of the storm. And it really comes back to defining the level of service for the peak rain event based on the community expectations for most of the storm sewer pipes. But the combined sewer is originally sized for a 10-year event, and the level of service that we were discussing in terms of the variables that affect that, it also has to do with the changes in the system over time. When it was originally built, it had design capacity, but over time things can change as it deteriorates or has been affected by deterioration. The capacity also could be affected. So typically it's going to be probably about 3 inches would be what the system would be designed to handle.
Hello, Tim Harrison, president of the Southwestern Outer Drive Neighborhood Association. My house was one of those homes in 2014 that had about 10 inches of water in the basement. Fortunately, not as bad as others, but still a lot to deal with. According to FEMA studies, a large portion of our neighborhood is in the Ecorse Creek floodplain. And I'm just wondering what, if any, plans you have to deal with or study how that, because Ecorse Creek doesn't run through Dearborn, so dealing with how that affects our city, potentially dealing with Dearborn Heights, and how that, because the flooding that's coming from Dearborn Heights is just literally half a block from my house, and it's dealing with in our neighborhood. So I don't know if you've thought about that at all, but this whole half of this purple section on the map down here is in the Ecorse Creek floodplain, so that's something to consider when we're looking at these studies.
Thank you.
So I'm building this model that's going to be representing the system. It's a pretty comprehensive process that takes a lot of considerations into account. One of those big considerations, something that you're getting at, that the water that's falling on the model might not necessarily be coming from the study area that's being shown on the map. And so going through that process, there's going to be an investigation into, how much water is in each region of the model. And so we're going to have to tune the model to be in match with reality. So that's part of what we have these flow meters out there for. I'm going to be installing more flow meters out there in the future to gauge what's going on in the system in real time for real events that we can observe. And then we can tune that model to be predictive of reality, what's going on through the course of the year. So and I think what you're getting at is that this water is coming from outside the system. We should be calibrating them out to reality to reflect what's going on throughout a period of time, to get a good idea of things that are outside of our control within the context of this model. So I hope, does that get at what you're asking?
Yeah, I hope that's considered when we're looking at how this works.
It will be considered, for sure.
And the other point I'll add is I've been in serious conversation with Mayor Bill Bazzi, as well as Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. As you know, they brought several federal agencies out to Ecorse Creek to evaluate what can be done in the region. I also know that the mayor of Dearborn Heights is currently in conversations with Wayne County about an allocation of ARPA dollars to be used to help mediate the flooding due to Ecorse Creek. And so I do believe, I don't want to guarantee that project's coming through, but I do think that's like, top on the radar for Dearborn. It's like the #1 project for Dearborn Heights that they submitted. I do know that Wayne County is currently evaluating it to see if they can help support some work around Ecorse Creek right now in the immediate future.
Hello, I'm Zaza, a Dearborn resident. My home was flooded in 2014, 2016, and 2021. Thank you to the City of Dearborn for having this town hall and for you all for taking on this project. As you can see in this room, there should be a lot more people here. I believe a lot of that has to do, just from conversation with my family, trust in the administration, not necessarily Mayor Hammoud, just past administrations. And it seems like this project is going to take a lot of community engagement and involvement. So how do you plan on building that community engagement?
I'll start, and then if Michael Bashara wants to add on to that. So part of the process is developing a relationship with the community, and dare I say trust. I'm not being paid to develop a specific solution. Our team is being paid to find the root causes of the flooding and work through what are potential solutions to help alleviate the flooding within the city. I want nothing more than everyone in the city to not have to deal with flooding. And so our team is here to help and work with you to develop a path forward. Our community engagement will be both push communication and pull communication. So we want to hear from you, we want your input, and we want to use that input as we navigate through the process. We will come back to the community and tell you at parts along the way where we have been and where we're going, and seek your input throughout that process. Anything else you want to add there?
Valerie expressed the goals with regard to community engagement perfectly. However, what I would like to add is that it is essential for us to hear from residents, from organizations, from neighborhood associations, from community groups who are on the ground, in touch with, and in conversation with residents and businesses who have been flooded in 2021, in 2014, where there's been a difficulty. We want to know about it, we want to learn, we want to listen, and then we want to share back what the process is, is going on as it unfolds. And it's important to all of us to make sure that those lines of communication remain open and are vibrant.
Yeah, I'll be a little more direct. So, government only works when people trust it. That's the truth of the matter. On the issue of flooding and water and sewer infrastructure, I think you nailed it. I think there is a lack of trust between the city doing what's necessary and really hitting those goals that residents really care for. I would be lying if I didn't wish this room was full, right? With every seat should be full because there's 10 times this auditorium worth of families that were impacted by last year's rain events. And so we're really trying to work to try to identify what's the best communication method with how you let residents know that you have an event happening. We're trying social media, we're trying WhatsApp messaging. We can't send the mailer on every single event that we have upcoming. Sometimes it's short notice. So you have 1 week to get the word out, and by the time you get a mailer ready, put it out in the mail, it gets in the mailbox after the date of the actual town hall. And so we're really trying to figure out what the best mode of communication with residents is as well. We have some new modes that will be coming out, hopefully in the next few weeks, that we think will be able to attract and reach a lot more residents. But we're also leaning on everybody in this room to, when you identify an event that you think is worthwhile, to pass that information along to friends, families, loved ones who are residing in the city to whom you think this would be important to. Again, this is just the kickoff. And so the goal of this is, and we'll post this recording online, there's a lot of people watching online, and we'll try to see if we can post it on CDTV as well, for our our more senior population who's on CDTV, and continually try to reach back out to see what more we could be doing. But trust is, foundational to anything we do on this measure. Because at the end of the study in 2 years, when we come forth and say, here are the 5 possible options, there's going to be a price tag before each option. And I think you heard earlier, the city's already spent $500 million on a CSO project. And when we come back with what the next project is going to cost, we're going to try to, make sure, do our best to see if those dollars are available at the state and federal level before we ever come asking the residents for anything. But there has to be a trust factor that you have confidence in the study that was conducted and the team that's on stage, and you have confidence in the city to execute whatever project you feel is best for our municipality and our city moving forward. Because ultimately it's all of our dollars and all of our families that will be paying in to whatever project it moves forward. So.
One other thing I would note is for those in person, on these boards up front is a QR code. If you want to scan that code, it will bring up a survey that you can enter your address, your flooding experiences, and then if you want to upload photos, you can do that as well. That will be used by the team as we start building that Lego model and trying to best calibrate that to what is happening on the ground. I believe it was also posted to the live stream as well, so that survey should be out to anyone who's watching or listening tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sam Baidoun. I'm the Wayne County Commissioner for the City of Dearborn, and I'm also a real estate broker for over 3 decades in the City of Dearborn. I have seen many floods in my career as a real estate broker, but I'm going to tell you first, I want to applaud the administration for putting this thing on. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit disappointed. If we had a flooding last week, we would have a room full of residents here. So allow me to say a couple of things in Arabic, especially for the eastern part of the city who are watching us. أدعو جميع السكان الذين يشاهدون الآن المشاركة في هذه الاجتماعات لكي نصل إلى حل مع المدينة ولكي نسأل الأسئلة المطروحة. أطلب من الجميع بالمشاركة. هذا شيء مهم وأتمنى من الجميع أن يشاركونا. I'm going to ask a question. Many residents, since the flooding of 2014 and 2021, installed what they call a backflow preventer, especially last year. A lot of residents are doing that. Will that impact the system? Where will this water go if it doesn't find a way? Is that going to impact the neighbors next door that don't have the backflow preventer? That's one question. I also serve on a Tri-County Summit for the water infrastructure for Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne. We've been meeting for the last 7 months, and this Friday we have a summit. We're going to be meeting at the Detroit Zoo. I don't know why they picked the Detroit Zoo, but we're going to be there, issuing a final report and recommendations, because this is an issue that affects all of us here. So I'm interested to know about this question that I asked earlier. Also, as you know, the city of Dearborn is on the lowest point. A lot of cities like Northville and Plymouth, a lot of the water keeps coming downstream. And I live behind the Rouge River in West Dearborn, and when we have a lot of water, the water rises. So I'm interested to hear some of your comments on this.
Thank you. So the first question related to backflow preventers. If 3 residents on a street of 10 houses put in a backflow preventer, and there is a bunch of water rushing through the system and it has nowhere to get out, there is a potential that the water will follow the path. The water will always follow the path of least resistance. And so if there are 3 homes with a backflow preventer and 7 homes without a backflow preventer, you may experience some additional flooding, or you may experience flooding in those homes that don't have a backflow preventer. I can't explicitly say you will or you won't. It depends on a lot of other factors, but that is certainly something to consider when looking at a backflow preventer program at the homeowner level. Related to, I would call the regional water issues, we can't control things outside of our control. What we will attempt to do is look at the root causes of the flooding, and if some of those root causes are outside of the city of Dearborn's ability to control, that's a conversation we can have with regional partners. I helped the 4 major counties in southeast Michigan over the last couple of years revise their post-construction stormwater standards. It's not the solution, it's a part of the set of solutions in the toolbox. So Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Livingston counties recently revised their stormwater standards to require new and redevelopment to better manage stormwater, which is a tool in the toolbox, along with green infrastructure, along with different pipe infrastructure solutions.
A couple more comments and I'll sit down. I also want to applaud Mayor Hamoud. As a Wayne County Commissioner, he's going to make announcements in the next couple of weeks about the money that's coming to Dearborn, where they're going to do a match and they're going to be creating more green space to address the flooding issue specifically. I think the city of Dearborn, especially the eastern part of the city, was built back in the early 1920s, and I'm sure your study is going to show that. We have an old system, correct me, Mr. Patel, if I'm wrong. We have, I think, 3-inch underground system that's designed to take 6 inches of water within 24 hours. Last year we had maybe 7 to 8 inches that fell within 4 to 5 hours. So the system obviously failed. Water, the system is not designed to take this much water, and as you know, a lot of people will tell you, East Dearborn, the population grew over the years. This system is not designed to take this much water, consider the consumption, considering the population in the city here, in the eastern part especially. Thank you. Good job, by the way.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I'm going to highlight just a few more. Sam touched on some dollars we'll be receiving that'll be geared more towards parks and green infrastructure. However, from the federal government, HUD has awarded us roughly $26 million now. So originally they gave us an allocation of $16 million for disaster relief to really work to try to implement some solutions to help mitigate flooding and really harden homes throughout the city of Dearborn. That was the original $16 million plan. We got a call last week saying there's an additional $10 million coming in. And so there's $26 million that we hopefully look to try to maximize. So we're trying to take that $26 million, see what other resources are out there to leverage. Because I'm a big believer that if you have $1, I'm pretty good at multiplying it without having to use city dollars. I'll try to find another source of revenue. And so the team is also working with our CDBG team, our economic development team, public health team, to review the plans that we're submitting to make sure that we're submitting the best possible solution for the allocated amount of money that we have that will impact and benefit the most homes. And so that's also very top of mind for us about what we want to do. As it pertains to regional collaboration, just recently the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments announced a green task force. So myself and the mayor of Rochester Hills are actually the co-chair of this task force. And the goal is for us to come up with a set of metrics that we all agree on as a region in terms of the greening of the whole Southeast Michigan area. Now, it might not be 100% related to flooding, but it's a start. These conversations, these benchmark measures have actually never been set before for Southeast Michigan, and now we're all working collectively around the room. And I think the goal, as you heard earlier, is if 100 million gallons of water are being dumped by every upstream community, I don't expect that they're going to stop dumping 100 million into the river. My hope is that maybe they come back 10 million gallons or 20 million gallons. And what that does is it gives us the ability then to dump a little bit more in the river before it reaches capacity. And that's our hope. And we're also working with GLEWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority, who kind of manages most of our sewer lines throughout the city, as well as our congressional officials, to try to encourage the Army Corps of Engineers to come in and do a deep study on the Rouge River and on the whole area, because that will also help us tap into a whole host of federal dollars that can help improve the area. Government is resource rich right now. That's just the matter of fact. The federal government, the state government, the county government. And what we're trying to do is use this once in a generational opportunity to leverage those dollars and gear those investments on things that will really make generational impact. And one of the top priorities we have in this administration, and I know of my council, 3 of which members are here, almost have a quorum, 3 of which are here, it really is flooding and flood mitigation. It's a top of mind issue always as we're moving forward, and we just wanted to have this town hall again to communicate with residents, because oftentimes, the reality is, you don't notice government when government is working well. You go about the day-to-day, a rain event happens, no flooding occurs, so, there's no outrage on the outside of it, your garbage gets picked up, leaf pickup we're working on, and so you don't notice government when government is working well. But everybody notices government when government fails. And that's what happened last year. And so what we're trying to do is communicate now early on throughout the whole course of these next 2 years. We'll be communicating in multiple ways. So residents also know what government is doing when government is working well. Because it's not enough that we just try to come out and just defend ourselves when we think something went bad. It's us to communicate, be very transparent, open, and hold ourselves accountable. What are we doing to take actionable steps and measures to actually tackle some of the issues that are top priority for residents all across our city?
Hello, my name is Mustafa Hamoud. I'm one of 3 council members that the mayor mentioned. I'm also the youngest council member, and so this is kind of part of my question for you guys, having to do with the resiliency of the modeling that you guys are going to do for our city. So first, I do also want to thank you guys for coming here and being transparent with us, and I look forward to seeing what other community sessions we have here. Kind of one of the things that my colleague said when she was up here, but I kind of want to elaborate on it further. So there are basic design guidelines that, for example, the federal government and sometimes the state sets for these types of situations. And there is a federal atlas on what the expected precipitation is for an area. My thing is though, and actually the mayor mentioned SEMCOG, they also have their own models as far as rainfall and things like that, which I personally think are more accurate than necessarily the book guidelines that you see sometimes in federal legislation. And I say this because I'm an engineer, and the textbook that was made usually in the 70s or something is not necessarily the best thing that you can go off of today. So I guess my question for you guys, because I'm going to be on the body that is most likely going to take a look at the results and approve the measures that you guys are going to give, and we have to kind of attach a value, which I appreciate you guys also going through and explaining that, we're going to have to provide a dollar figure relative to level of service. And I think explaining that to people is going to be, part of what you guys do, but it's also going to be something that we do, because if we had $500 billion, we could build the best sewer system in the whole planet, but we don't. So trying to figure out what exactly that level of service is going to be critical, but also what I want to, and you guys don't have to answer right now, but maybe you have an answer in mind, but something I want to prime you for is, I'm going to ask about the climate resiliency of what you guys come up with and what the long-term effects of this are going to be, because I anticipate living in this community for a very long time, and the last thing that I want to do is come back in 20 years and have the same exact conversation one more time. So can you explain a little bit more about the long-term resiliency of the modeling that you guys anticipate doing? Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you for being here and asking the question. To get into a little bit more detail, rainfall values that we're using today are based on a summary of the past 50 to 60 years. So that's backward looking. We're looking at backward data to tell us what is happening today. just like anything, there's an average that we can use, and then there's a confidence interval associated with that average. Historically, engineers have always used that single number, that average. One piece we could do is look at the upper confidence interval band of that rainfall pattern. So for a predicted, I don't like using these terms, but a 10-year rainfall event, there's a value we use, and then there's a range that's within a 90% confidence interval. We could use that upper 90% confidence interval. That's the backward-looking data based on facts and history of what's occurred. So that's one step, one tiny step forward that we haven't done thus far. The other piece is then looking at forward-looking projections, and that's where we're getting into the climate change scenarios. And then once we get that Lego model built, we can run whatever rainfall we want through that system. We develop solutions that could be implemented, so we change those Legos around, and then we can run whatever rainfall events we want within that system to see how the system responds. So I would say that that's certainly something we plan to consider. Which rainfall values we use is an entirely different question, and something that we would then be looking to the community as a whole to help us decide which of those ranges are we going to use and which are we comfortable using. There's hundreds of different models out there that are predicting climate change scenarios and patterns, so which of those are we going to use will then kind of dictate some of the results and the impacts with that, the rebuilt Lego model. I don't know if I answered the question entirely, but okay.
And to address that a little bit too, we've talked a lot about these different rain events, and I think we're starting to find more and more that the rain events that we use to define these events are kind of a misnomer. You can get, like we said before, you can get 6 inches an hour, you can get 12 inches over 15 days. The frequency, the recurrence interval, and the amount of rain that you get in a time span is important. But if you design a model to a specific storm, if we say we're going to design a model of this storm, it is only designed to handle that storm that we prescribe and put into the model. So a portion of this study we're going to be looking at going ahead with is not just the rain, because I don't think anybody here cares how much it rained. You care that water came into your homes, came to the basement, flooded the streets. And so a part of that is trying to find out the recurrence interval of water in the pipes themselves. And so we have a side analysis that goes along with developing this model that doesn't just look at the rain, it looks at the recurrence interval of flows in the pipes themselves. And then you can start addressing the question of where is the cutoff line for how much water our system can handle and where can we start making improvements. So as a side, it's related to the rain, but a side portion of this study is going to be very much looking at that aspect as well.
Any other questions from the residents?
Go for it.
Unfortunately, I am an engineer, and also my home flooded 3 times, as the one woman said, back in 14, 16, and last year. So I am very, very passionate about this issue, actually. Are you going to be modeling just, you said you're not going to be just modeling specific rain events, but also like a season? So like, because that also has an effect on it, right? How
Yes.
much rain you get, like if the river level trends high, let's say, we have a gravity-based system, so it's going to be harder to get that water out of the pipes. So you're going to be looking at more than just rain events. Is that like, I just want to understand this weird.
So, because something we've kind of been dancing around getting at, right, is you could have the same rain event happen on 2 different days, and it wouldn't necessarily result in the exact same flooding occurrences 2 different times. You have different moisture situations on the surface that allow different amounts of runoff. You have different river levels that cause different backups in the system.
So you're going to be looking at it holistically.
And so you can look, you can look at the system holistically, and you can run a much longer span than just 1 year type of modeling simulation to figure out what the recurrence intervals are of flow in the pipes, as opposed to just the rainfall that's coming out of the system.
Well, then the climate model matters even more than. So like SEMCOG has, I think, that they use, if I remember off the top of my head. So I don't know if you guys do work in Southeast Michigan, right? like, I think that was on the pro forma that we looked at. So you guys are familiar with all of those? Okay, all right, good enough for me.
Just to clarify the statement, yes, SEMCOG has 6 that they looked at, but they started with about 100 different models and whittled it down to 6 that they felt were most reflective of the region and rainfall. So yes, we are aware of those.
So I got one question though. Your model is going to be based on average river elevation, Roos River elevation, flood, water level, and then you're going to have another model based on the highest Roos River water elevation. Is that correct?
I didn't hear the first part, but I think what you're asking is, are we going to consider multiple elevations in
Correct.
the river when we run the scenario?
So the highest elevation, I guess we noted last year for Roos River was about 583.
583 has been ingrained in my head now. Yes.
And so far the modeling has been done, I guess, was about 578. So it's a significant difference that occurred back again in 2000 and 2021. It's a 5-foot difference. With the hydraulics, 5-foot difference is a lot.
Absolutely. 5 feet higher downstream condition makes a big impact on system performance.
You guys take care of the higher elevation as well.
We're gonna look at the bounds, so the highest point and the lowest point, and the scenarios in between. That's right. Any other questions at this point?
Okay, can we give them a round of applause just to thank them for coming out? Thank you all so much. Thank you for everybody that came out. Thank you to those that tuned in. I know the first 20 minutes of the town hall, for those who are tuning in, there was a Facebook glitch. And so we've recorded the whole town hall. And so we'll repost the whole video over the next few days on our social media account. And trying to make sure that people have an opportunity to watch this whenever they like, if you want to refer back to it. And again, this is just the first of many community touch points. Our hope is that this is an ongoing conversation with residents, OHM, as well as the administration, to make sure that we deliver the best possible project so we have a clear understanding for what the direction is moving forward. With that, tomorrow we have a council meeting. If you are so excited to join us, it's at 7:30 at the DAC. And I do also know Wednesday at Dearborn, we also have a city charter. Is it a study session or actual meeting? City charter study session on precincting for, is that what we call it? Districting for city council elections. I'll call it that. That'd be the easier way to call it. So that's that Wednesday at 6 o'clock at the DAC as well. And with that, bid you all a good night. Thank you.